Imagine being convicted of a crime you didn't commit. Imagine your life being cut short by a terrible mistake. This is not only the story of a serial killer, but also the price an innocent man paid. This is the story of how the Butcher of Inner Mongolia exposed the dark side of justice, a darkness that went unnoticed for years, like a poisonous snake coiled in the shadows. This darkness had a name: Zhao Zhihong. He was not just a man, he was an enigma, a monstrous enigma whose actions shook China to its core. But how did a man become a monster? To understand this, we need to go back to the beginning. Zhao Zhihong was born in 1968 to a simple family. He spent his childhood in a modest house surrounded by the vast expanse of the steppes. Neighbors described him as a quiet and withdrawn child, always keeping to himself. No one could have guessed that darkness was brewing within this quiet soul. In his youth, Zhao Zhihong had no particular achievements. He was an ordinary young man trying to find his place in life. But behind this ordinary appearance, there was something sinister. Something that would eventually burst out, leaving a bloody trail in its wake. This is the story of how an ordinary man turned into a monster, and how his crimes exposed the dark side of human nature and the failures of justice. Zhao Zhihong's first murders were especially cruel and cold-blooded. He showed no compassion for his victims, taking their lives with chilling calm. His actions were carefully planned, which speaks of his calculating and cold-blooded nature. In one of his first murders, he attacked a young woman who was returning home late at night. He dragged her to a deserted place. His actions were so brutal that even experienced investigators were shocked by what they saw. In another case, he broke into the home of a lonely woman and attacked her in her sleep. He inflicted numerous wounds, leaving her no chance of survival. His cold-bloodedness was demonstrated by the fact that after the crime, he remained in the house as if nothing had happened. Zhao Zhihong did not limit himself to one method. He used various tools to take the lives of his victims. He demonstrated his ingenuity in cruelty. His actions were unpredictable, which made the work of investigators difficult. The crime scenes were horrific. He made no attempt to hide the traces of his crimes, as if he enjoyed the horror they caused. Zhao Zhihong's cold-bloodedness was demonstrated in his behavior after the crime. He continued to live his normal life as if nothing had happened. He communicated with neighbors, went to work, without showing the slightest sign of guilt or remorse. His first crimes were a precursor to a series of brutal murders that shocked Inner Mongolia. He became a symbol of the evil that lurks within the human soul, and his actions left a lasting scar on the hearts of those who knew his victims. Zhao Zhihong, known as the Butcher of Inner Mongolia, was a serial killer whose crimes shocked China. His actions were particularly brutal and cold-blooded, and his motives remain a subject of debate among criminologists. His victims were mostly women, whom he would stalk in isolated places or break into their homes. The Zhao Zhihong case left a deep mark on Chinese society, significantly affecting the families of the victims and law enforcement. The brutality of the crimes caused a wave of fear and distrust. Society was shocked by the realization that such brutal crimes could be committed in their midst. The case of an innocent man executed due to investigative errors caused a wide public outcry. This led to criticism of the justice system and demands for reform. The Zhao Zhihong case became the occasion for a wide discussion of the problems associated with serial killings, the psychological aspects of crimes, and the effectiveness of law enforcement. The families of the victims experienced a deep and irreparable loss. They lost loved ones, and this left an indelible wound. The arrest and conviction of Zhao Zhihong brought some sense of justice to the families of the victims. They saw that the perpetrator was punished. It is also important to note that the psychological consequences for the families of the victims were very serious. The Zhao Zhihong case exposed serious shortcomings in law enforcement. It led to reforms aimed at improving the quality of investigations and preventing errors. The need for more effective use of forensic science became apparent. This led to the introduction of new technologies and better training of experts. The Zhao Zhihong case highlighted the importance of holding investigators and prosecutors more accountable for their work. Overall, the Zhao Zhihong case was a tragic event that had a profound impact on Chinese society and the justice system. The psychological analysis of serial killers like Zhao Zhihong is a complex task that requires taking into account many factors. Experts agree that their actions are based on a complex combination of psychological, social and biological factors. Many serial killers exhibit traits of antisocial personality disorder, characterized by a lack of empathy, impulsiveness and a tendency to manipulate. Sadism, the enjoyment derived from causing pain and suffering to others, is a common trait among serial killers. Many serial killers have experienced childhood trauma, such as violence or abuse, which may have affected their psychological development. Serial killers often seek power and control over their victims, which may be related to feelings of inferiority or helplessness. Social isolation, lack of support, and negative environmental influences may contribute to the development of deviant behavior. Some research suggests that genetic factors and brain disorders may play a role in the propensity for violence. Cultural norms that encourage violence or discrimination may contribute to the development of aggressive behavior. In the case of Zhao Zhihong, as with many other serial killers, his motives for his actions were likely a complex combination of these factors. Psychological analysis of his crimes suggests that he suffered from deep psychological problems that led him to commit horrific crimes. Zhao Zhihong's case was a grim reminder of the dark side of human nature. His brutal and cold-blooded crimes shocked China, causing shock and horror in the society. Zhao Zhihong was eventually arrested and confessed to committing a series of brutal murders. The court found him guilty and sentenced him to death. Zhao Zhihong's case shows that evil can hide behind ordinary appearances. He lived an ordinary life without arousing suspicion, but at the same time committed monstrous. Zhao Zhihong's case was a tragic event that had a profound impact on Chinese society and the justice system. Zhao Zhihong's motives are not entirely clear. He may have suffered from an unmet need for power and control. His crimes may have been a way to vent pent-up aggression and hatred. His actions were sadistic in nature, indicating deep psychological problems. Some experts suggest that he may have suffered from antisocial personality disorder. Several of his victims were found in public toilets located in the city of Hohhot. These places were deserted and secluded, which allowed Zhao Zhihong to commit crimes without witnesses. Many of his victims were attacked on the streets and in alleys when they were returning home late at night. Zhao Zhihong chose deserted places where he could attack his victims without attracting attention. In some cases, Zhao Zhihong broke into his victims' homes, committing murders in their sleep. This indicates his particular cruelty and cold-bloodedness. The bodies of the victims were also found in vacant lots and remote locations. Zhao Zhihong chose places where there were few people to avoid witnesses. The crime scenes were often secluded, allowing him to commit murders without attracting attention. Zhao Zhihong committed the murders in different places, making it difficult for investigators. He chose deserted and secluded places where he could commit murders without fear of being noticed. The investigation of Zhao Zhihong's crimes was a long and difficult process, marked by a number of mistakes and omissions on the part of law enforcement. Zhao Zhihong was careful and tried not to leave evidence at the crime scenes. This made the work of investigators difficult and slowed down the investigation process. The crimes were committed in different places or at night, making it difficult to find witnesses. One of the most serious mistakes of the investigation was the wrongful accusation and execution of an innocent man, Hugjilt. In 1996, Hugjilt was falsely accused. Despite his protestations of innocence, he was convicted and executed. An innocent man was executed, which was a tragedy for his family and caused a public outcry. Investigators missed a number of clues that could have helped them identify the real killer. The lack of proper coordination between different police departments made the investigation difficult. Despite his caution, Zhao Zhihong still left some evidence at the crime scenes. These included traces of blood, fingerprints, and other materials. However, Due to the poor work of investigators, these clues were not discovered and analyzed in time. Investigative errors led to the real killer, Zhao Zhihong, remaining at large for many years. The Zhao Zhihong case exposed the problems in China's justice system and led to reforms in law enforcement. Became a sad reminder of how investigative errors can lead to tragic consequences.